And we're live. Welcome to the Best in Slot Podcast, a Warcraft podcast by the community for the community. I'm your main host, Sparty. I'm here with my co-host, Midgettes. Happy Mother's Day to all the awesome mothers out there. Happy Mother's Day to you as well, Midgettes. Really, the mother of Zeros to Heroes. How are you?
I'm good, and thank you. It was a wonderful day. How was your day with Dria's and her second Mother's Day?
It was good. We went out for brunch and it was fantastic. Spent out, day in the park. It was great. So yes, happy Mother's Day to all you awesome people out there. Nobody loves you like your mothers do. But let's get right into it. This is episode 27, and as our mothers are like our raid leaders, we'll be talking about our raid leaders being always right. We'll be talking about the anniversaries of Zeros to Heroes, and of course, we do have beta keys. These are the hardest things to give away. You guys have no idea. Like, I have so many beta keys to give away, and it is so hard to give away free things. I've been streaming for 5 years, and it is probably the toughest thing to do, to give away free things. It's so tough. But, we'll try. We'll try to... Yeah, we'll try. We'll talk about it at the end of the podcast. We'll do a couple of different contests, someone through the podcast, but we'll try our best to give away beta keys because I know people still want to play beta.
They do.
They do. There's things. There's exciting things.
There's exciting things coming. Well, let's start with that silly joke of the week.
You mean my awesome joke? Okay. Let me see. Let me pull one up here. Okay. What do you call a fake noodle?
What?
An impasta.
Oh my goodness. I think I've sent that one to you before.
It was yesterday's joke of the day, so I took it. It was probably the best one of the week. It was fantastic. I love it. Dad jokes are awesome. Send me your dad jokes.
Fantastic. It might be.
That should be a beta key giveaway idea. Best dad joke wins. Anyway, moving on. Zeros to Heroes, 3rd anniversary. So what, 3 years this guild has been around, this amazing, thriving community guild. Tons of raid teams, huge community. It's incredible. 3 years have gone by.
Can't believe it's been 3 years. And there's a special video that'll be coming out on the Zeros to Heroes Twitter tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That short film made for us. And I want to tell you that it really touched me. It's a very short video, and I encourage everybody to watch it. It'll be on the Twitter tomorrow to wish Zeros to Heroes happy 3rd anniversary, or is it birthday? I can never remember.
I don't know. It's a birthday anniversary. But yeah, this video is fantastic. Super well done by short film, voiced by Ariana. It's incredible. I'm going to hype it up plenty. Some of the leaders have seen it already. We'll be sharing with the guild tomorrow for the anniversary, and we'll do some fun anniversary events tomorrow as well.
You always pay such close attention. The guild has already seen it. It's in the Discord channel.
Oh, is that what you... Well then. People have seen it. It'll be on Twitter. For those of you that are not in Zeros to Heroes, you'll see this awesome video, and this is really what every community should be like. And, I've been told we're an outlier with Death Jesters and Zeros to Heroes, but I don't know. I think, we're awesome, and, we have the same kind of community that we want to have. But the fun stuff, people are here for beta keys, right? Yeah, we're going to do beta keys to the podcast. We have a bunch of keys to give away. We've sort of planned them out over the week. We had to throw in our proposal to Blizzard for what we're going to do with the keys. And, I always hate the lazy, hey, follow, retweet. I think they're just all really garbage. And, no offense to everybody that does it. That's fine. Do your own thing. I strive and I love community engagement. I love people doing stuff and earning keys and having fun and working hard for these things. So that's more of what we're going to be doing. We'll be doing a lot.
Do you know who works hardest on your beta giveaways?
Who? Do tell.
Me.
Oh. This is true. I don't know what we would do without, it takes a lot of work to make these really fun. And yeah, we could just, retweet them, whatever. But part of it is going to be in-game events. And we're saying goodbye to Legion and hello to Battle for Azeroth. So we'll be doing, some goodbye Legion things that you may have missed out on, whether it be toys or mounts or just fun events like that or different places you may have seen or may have not seen. So it'll be fun. So I'm going to hype it up here.
Well, and if they have things that they'd like to see, especially if they're Legion-based, because a lot of the events we've done have been in previous X-Packs.
Mm-hmm.
If you have some great idea of something that would be a fun competition to do in a Broken Shore zone or a Legion area,
mm-hmm.
send us a message at bestinslotpodcast@gmail.com.
Absolutely. So Muffinous, Jeremy Fiesel, he does a lot of pet stuff and secrets, and he was doing
He's awesome.
He's fantastic, and he was leaking some stuff on the Twitter. What was he saying?
Well, he's talking about that there's a new tameable hunter pet, and a lot of people jumped on the idea that it was a unicorn.
Mm.
And people are even saying that he confirmed that. I'm not convinced he confirmed that. I'm waiting to see. But apparently, there's going to be unicorns potentially as new tameable pets for the hunters.
Interesting.
And there's a whole bunch of new content coming out that we're going to see that's supposed to come out, I believe, on Tuesday. And they're really excited to see it. And so we hopefully get some beta keys giveaway so people who don't have beta access can get in and see it. But it's exciting. And if you don't, if you only come by and check him out once in a while, he's the guy that puts all the secrets information out there. He'll put these little tidbits. That's how they all found the nightmare mount. So, which we have some ideas that we might use for contents there. We're going to put you in the maze and then leave, and we'll come back in about 6 hours.
I have no idea. Yeah, I have no intention of doing that maze.
If you actually made it out, we'll give you a beta key.
Oh man. Yeah, I'm just thinking if there's gonna be unicorn pets, I'm gonna level my hunter, tame this unicorn, and I'm gonna name this unicorn Horny, because he's got.
You are not.
And we're moving on. So the Warcraft devs, in an upcoming beta build, so they've obviously heard feedback on the whole GCD issue, right? And one of the things that they're adjusting is what? That racial abilities and on-use trinkets will again be off the GCD. I mean, that sounds like a step in the right direction. DPS players are happy. People are, it's not as clunky. I guess the next step would be, let's take defensive off the GCD as well.
Well, I'd say they might be a little bit happier, or they might be saying Blizzard is caving. And I'm still waiting to see what the end result is. But they did change the racial abilities and trinkets.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they put in defensives as off the GCD, they should leave it at that. And that's a really good compromise between gameplay and, their overall goal, which is, minimizing total amount of cooldowns that a player has and just making those choices more important. But I mean, we've had the discussion plenty of times. They have their own feedback, and people have voiced other opinions, but that's fine too. But
and it's beta, and everything changes. Next week, it could be totally different.
That's right. They could put racial abilities back on the GCD next week. You never know. Maybe
they'll make gnome paladins.
Oh well, but they can't reach the light, right? We've said that joke
before.
Don't
you go there.
We've said that one. But talking about feedback, right? Like there's a good tweet to Warcraft devs from what's his name, Shablagoosh. I have no idea what that word says. And the guy says to Warcraft devs, "Hey, I love barbed shot for beast mastery. However, I think it's strange that you can't fire an arrow at a target unless your pet is within range. Also, the barb is bugged and doesn't put a dot on enemies in beta." And Warcraft devs say, "Oh, well, we've identified a couple of issues here and working to fixing them. Thank you for the pointer." That's how you give feedback, right? It's not, hey, here's a picture of my butt. This game sucks. Your dev should be fired. This thing sucks, and GCD this and clunky that. That's not how you give feedback. But this guy, this Shablagoosh, that's how you give feedback. You just tweet them, and they obviously go through the Twitter, and that's fantastic. That's great.
Well, and they'll actually give you thoughtful responses, and I appreciate the response from the Warcraft community and in general, and they generally respond to reasonable tweets. You all have your own version of reasonable, but that one was pretty good, so I'm proud of it.
That's good.
Now, Fat Boss has started putting up the Uldir, is it Uldir? Uldir raid boss previews. So they're up, and you can start seeing first encounters with these new raid bosses. Have we been, and I know our guys were working on it this weekend, and so I'll be curious to see what feedback we get the week ahead. But if you want to get a first look at the boss, they've got some great guides up.
Yeah, and it just means that we have to bring Coach's Corner, preview videos back and boss explanation videos back. So that's something we're going to have in the next couple of months as we do more testing on beta and do some raid testing, and Sparty will bring back all the fun Coach's Corner videos that you guys love. So that's exciting.
It is exciting. And then yesterday, the Spring Balloon Festival ended.
Oh, no.
I finally got to go on a balloon ride.
Fantastic. How was it?
It was awesome. The worst part about it is the 3 people. You have to have 3 people. And so I had to queue and looking for group. And then so I wish they would take that part of it away, but because nobody wanted, well, they were raiding and they were re-killing Argus with my team. I went on a balloon ride and it was funny and I laughed and I had a great time and I would have done more of them, but I didn't want to wait 10 or 15 or 20 minutes for the next, for 3 people to get together. So that sort of makes it a bummer. And I wanted to get that out there. Midget request is remove that criteria.
Interesting. I'm trying to think of a balloon hot air joke here somewhere. It's around here somewhere.
Somewhere.
It's up in the sky.
Well, what about what's in the news?
This one I really liked, and I know Wowhead got this one as well. And basically, the one guy got jailed for DDoSing the U.S. servers, which was fantastic. Internet has no bounds, and this kind of ass hattery again serves no purpose. So I'm glad that they've cracked down on this kind of stuff because again, it's not okay, and being the internet as an excuse is never a good enough reason. So I mean, that's good. They jailed him. I can't remember how long it was. But that's good. I mean, again, it's tampering with
consequences for actions.
This is
I'm
true.
All for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and they actually it was a long 8 years later. So don't ever fool yourself in that anything in the justice.
Yeah, I wonder what the statute of limitation is on DDoSing Blizzard servers.
So I've been highlighting some of the guides on Wowhead because they keep coming out with these great guides, and there's one out there for mount farmers.
Oh.
And it sits there and it shows you what you can do daily, what you can do weekly.
Oh, I could use this.
Yeah, it's a really nice guide so that you can get all the mounts that you want for your mount collectors. I showed it to Aelid, but he's almost done. I think he's got almost every mount in the game.
See, I was thinking of doing these things because I know we have Simple Armory, which basically shows which pets and mounts you're missing, and then it can go into what's the the most efficient way to go farm mounts, things like that. But I'm gonna have to check out this Wowhead guide for mount farmers because I wouldn't mind some more. I would like to hit the next achievement, and as I do guild interviews and things like that, it'd be great to get that kind of stuff done.
So did you hear about? Why don't you tell everybody about this new bounty?
Yes, this is exciting. So Raider.io with Wowhead and Warcraft Logs have put together the world first Mythic Plus bounty. I mean, it's awesome. Nobody's completed World First 30 yet. It's going to happen at some point. In terms of what the actual prizes are, I think they had some. Your premium, they had Raider.io Revered, Warcraft Logs Platinum, that kind of stuff, and I think they had a mount or a pet or something as well, which is that's not bad. It's pretty cool. I mean, I think there should be bigger prizes for doing a 30 plus. And I wonder how long it's going to take for someone to get to it, but I don't know.
They just got the plus 29, I think, last week.
Oh.
So it'll be exciting to see as they compete to get this World First plus 30.
Interesting. That's pretty good. And so I have a dad joke of the week, and I guess you have a funny of the week, or?
Yeah, I go out and find funny things on Twitter. This one is from Warcraft Stats. And if you don't follow Warcraft Stats, they're awesome. They have some great
I love Warcraft
tweets.
Stats.
Yes. And you can
full
find
of awesome
them on
puns, and yeah, they're great.
Yeah, full of puns at Warcraft Stats. And this one was actually a little older one, but I thought it might maybe be appropriate this week. And he retweeted Kanye West, and Kanye West said, question everything. And Warcraft Stats said, except raid leaders, Kanye. There are limits, except raid leaders.
That's right. You don't question raid leaders. And you know what? Warcraft Stats, I'm a very funny person, and these guys are probably funnier than me. Like, if you're going to follow anybody on Twitter, you follow Warcraft Stats. They're hilarious. I mean, the numbers are made up and everything else, but, well, they might be, statistically. But they're awesome. Follow them on Twitter. And yes, I mean, do you question raid leaders? I guess that can, bring us right into this week's topic. And, there's really 2 rules in raiding. And you guys hear me often say, the different rules of raiding, which is, always stand in the right spot and kill ads and the boss will die, right? Like, yeah. But really, the 2 rules in raiding are, number 1, the raid lead is always right. And number 2, if the raid lead is wrong, well, see rule number 1. Right?
Wait a minute. Just wait a minute. What do you do if the raid lead is wrong?
What do you mean wrong? I don't understand wrong. We're never wrong. I mean, sometimes maybe, but during the raid, is not the time to disrupt the flow of the raid. So if I'm wrong on this podcast, Midgets, it's in the middle of the podcast is not the time to correct Sparty. Maybe afterwards, and we can release a press release afterwards. Oh yeah, Sparty misspoke somewhere here.
You are wrong, and I'm really angry that you're telling me that you're not wrong, and you called me out, and you don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, is that so? Maybe you should be the raid leader.
So
interesting.
Yeah, no.
Well, I mean, and that sort of goes us into our first little segment here, which is, rating advice from the experts. And, we hear this kind of stuff all the time. The raid leaders aren't doing stuff, right? They're not doing things right. Let's forget the fact that, 95% of the time, 99% of the time, they're doing things correctly. But let's look at the 1%. So what 1% of the time are raid leads doing things incorrectly?
Well, it depends on the day. Sometimes I really like my raid lead, and sometimes he's always wrong. But, maybe I was called out by the raid lead, and it was a bad call. He was wrong.
Oh, okay. So
I didn't stand in the fire.
You didn't? Okay. So
no.
The replay says you're wrong. The Warcraft logs say you're wrong. My Twitch video says you're wrong, and I'd love to agree with you at this point, but then we'd both be wrong.
What if I come back later and I show you from those same logs where you're wrong?
Oh, well, that's absolutely okay. I'm okay being wrong. You think I'm perfect, Mr. Perfect over here? No. Raid leaders are not perfect. They make mistakes, but there's a time and a place. And, we're going to talk about, well, what if the raid lead made a bad call? When's the best time to bring that up, and when's the best time to adjust? And again, we'll talk about good and bad raid leads and that kind of stuff. But what are some other things that raid leads are doing wrong, in your opinion?
Well, the strat is wrong.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
The strat sucks.
In my old guild, we went to the left instead of the right.
Oh, listen. Let me stop you right there. Your old guild sucked. That's why you're in Sparty's guild now. But really, though, that's fine. You think the strat sucks? Okay, great. What's your suggestion and why? I mean, it's fine that your old guild did things differently, and that's okay. But why did they do those things, right? And we'll talk about, well, if the strat is wrong, okay, if you have a suggestion for it, right? And sometimes, you've got this feeling like this isn't the most efficient way to do the strat. Okay, fine. Let's work out a solution. But what else?
Well, I don't think you would hold the other people accountable for the mistakes they're making in raid. They're not keeping up.
That's actually a really common one that a lot of players come to me, when they apply to the guild, and they say, this old raid lead wasn't keeping anybody accountable. They're just, letting things go. They're afraid to call people out and hurt their feelings, and, they might get offended and all that. Like, that's fine, But you know what? People need to be held accountable for their mistakes, and at the same time, they need to be pat on the back for the good stuff they do, and it's, it's a good balancing act. But, maybe you're right. Maybe we aren't, properly keeping people accountable. Maybe we're...
Well, Joe said you're not doing it right.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess we'll talk to Joe afterwards. And we'll see what happens.
Well, and you're not bringing in new people, so there's no competition, so everybody's being complacent.
Yeah, and you know what? That happens too, right? You have this, you've been in a core spot for a long time. You think you're solid there, but what's best for the guild? Well, sometimes it's going to be recruiting more players so players don't get complacent, right? Because as much as I love raiding with my friend for the last couple of years, if they start getting really lazy and complacent or whatever, is that really best for the guild? Is there going to be favoritism? And there's lots of things to consider at that point. But is there any more?
Well, you let people talk over you and fight with you. I mean, like I'm doing right now.
Oh, well, that's a big one. And that's something that I personally harp down on, where, people should not be talking over raid leads. It's if the raid leads are speaking, it's clearly something important, and there's a time and a place to joke around. But if, we're calling reses and we're calling cooldowns and we're making adjustments and we're calling swaps, it's a hugely disrespectful thing to talk over raid leads. And we want to know how your day went, but in the middle of the boss fight is probably not the best time, right? And again, it depends with every single guild, and depends on the seriousness of that guild in terms of how they raid. But no, you want to be that, I guess, alpha person where you're commanding and you're leading with respect, and you don't let people talk over you. And that's not okay. And people do need to learn, like, even though it's a video game, we're also spending lots of time and we're sacrificing time to play games together.
Yeah. Well, you play favorites.
Oh,
You give them the best loot. You bring them in for all the bosses. And I know when I make a mistake, you call me out. But if they, or you tell, if they make a mistake, they're perfect. And you call me out for things that are not as bad.
interesting. Perception's a bitch. Perception. I mean, she's probably right. She's 100% right in the way that she perceives things, and maybe there's a better way to do those kinds of things where, yeah, we're not calling out, the veteran that's been here for a couple of years because they already know what they did incorrectly and they already know how to correct it. But we're calling those apps out because they don't know. They don't know how to self-correct and what kind of things they're looking for, and not necessarily, calling or making favorites, right? Or we're not calling those other people out. We might be doing that in private channels, but when we call people out, it might be for the benefit of the raid team, for everybody's learning, right? It's, hey, Joe, you stood in fire, right? Because of this reason. Okay, that's not just for Joe, but we're correcting the entire team as a whole. Anyway, moving on. Is there any more?
I really feel sorry for Joe because he's always our target.
Oh, Joe.
Anyway, I was set for a boss that I want to be in for. I needed the loot, and the person that they put in my place doesn't need anything.
Oh, you needed that loot, huh? Oh, I see. So as a raid lead, we need to decide sort of what's the best composition. As much as I would love to bring in 15 casters for Kingaroth and the Trinket and bring all the Shadow Priests and Warlocks and whatever for the the Acid Injector, we can't. We're gonna have to bring in some melee. We have to bring a balanced composition, and sometimes, even though you do need loot, you're gonna have to swap out. Right? That's part of the game, right? It's part of the nature of being part of a team. And, yeah, you're going to have your best players on sometimes, and sometimes you're going to sit them out to bring in some of the other players in. And at the end of the day, yeah, we all need the loot, or we all want the loot. But what is going to down that boss? Even though...
Yeah, but you've extended for the last 2 months.
Yep. And that's a fair point. We've extended for a while because that's the next goal of the guild, right? That's one of the questions we ask to some of our potential applicants. Hey, if we're going to be extending a boss for 3 weeks and you're not in the composition, the raid composition, are you okay with sitting out for 3 weeks and watching streams and listening to Discord and going through all that stuff, right? Because there's not a lot of raiding you're going to have to do, but at the same time, you have to keep up with what everybody else is doing. So, I mean, it's a fair point, right? And how do we handle these scenarios? Well, there's the right and the wrong, and, it's... From being called up by the raid lead, there's a time and a place, right? If you think the strat sucks, well, time and a place, right? What are your suggestions? It's like that with anything. Oh, this thing sucks about this guild. Okay, well, what's your suggestion? Well, I don't know about any suggestions. I just am here to complain and whine. Okay, well, that's not really productive either, right? And part of it is keeping people accountable. You're right. There's a balance between being fair as a raid lead and calling people out, and it's tough, and it's tough for a lot of guilds that are on small population servers because it's tough to recruit. And I know a lot of guilds have gone through that. You're on those crappy little, I don't know, RP realms or something, and no offense, RP realms, and you can't call people out because as soon as you hurt their feelings, they're going to leave, and you're down a player, and it's that tough balancing act. And well, maybe it's time to go to different servers and try to recruit different people and just do your best there. And that goes back to, well, our raid lead's not recruiting enough. Well, maybe the officer should be recruiting and raid lead should not be. Again, it's keeping, your raid in line with sort of what your expectations of the guild are. And every guild is different. With mine, it's if raid leaders or important people are talking, well, then we stop talking, right? And we can be mid-conversation, but we want to get things going, because if Midgettes wants to talk about gnome jokes all day long and I'm trying to get swaps done here, we're waiting for 5 minutes while Midgettes tells a story about a gnome and a tree and a dwarf or whatever, and we're waiting for swaps, and Midgettes has wasted 5 minutes of time because of Joe. Let's just blame Joe again.
We're gonna blame Joe again.
We're gonna blame Joe. And with playing favorites too, a lot of that is just perception, right? People don't see other people being called out, and they don't see what else is going on behind the scenes. And so, as raid leaders, we need to be cognizant of that, right? Midgettes was absolutely right. It doesn't seem like we're calling out the other people. It doesn't seem like, we're bringing in Midgettes over the other person. And there's probably reasons for that, right? It could be compositions reasons. It could be, fairness. It could be a lot of different things. But why? Well, it could be performance. Absolutely. It could be a million things. So rather than assuming as a player, well, what could we do? We can ask. We can have those conversations of, hey, why did you sit me on this boss? Okay. And then I'll say, okay, well...
raid is not the time to do it.
Oh man, yeah, that's right. And as a raid lead, like it's you should have good decisions. You should have good reasons for these decisions. If I'm going to sit out midgets for another priest, right? Well, why is the other priest in? We both need loot. Well, you know what, midgets, you were in for the last 3 bosses, and now we're going to bring in midgets or the other priest, Joe, the priest, for the other boss. And we want to be a little bit fair to our players too, and make sure we have a decent composition for these guys. So
as leaders, how do you deal with all of the different player feedback that you get? You get it all the time from 20 to 30 different sources. All of these people have different thoughts on what is the right way to run the raid or the strat or hold people accountable. How do you handle all the feedback?
Well, I'm not going to go into like the whole Sparty sarcastic, your old guild suck. Like that's all fun and games, and that's the smart ass thing. But you sort of have to handle it where you're respectful of everybody's opinions. Of you know what, this person Joe here has a great opinion on how the raid should be led, right? Maybe that's not what the ideals of the guild and the raid lead are, right? We might have different expectations of the raid team. Right? And that's okay. You do have armchair raid leaders, and everyone's going to give feedback. And you know what? It comes down to, you can't please everybody. Yes, you can try to please everybody, and I'm a firm believer that you should try to please people, but realize that you will not, right? You will always fail at pleasing everybody, and that's going to happen, right? People are going to disagree, and you just have to agree to disagree sometimes, and that's okay. But, a lot of it comes down to expectations of the raid team, right? Joe thinks every single person should be called out for every single mistake they make, no matter how minute. Well, Joe, that's a great opinion. I don't necessarily agree, right? I think some of the overall learning should be, but if somebody is, I don't know, taking half a second from the fire ticks, maybe they don't need to be called out for every single thing, and some things should be given, in terms of feedback afterwards with their necessary mentors or with app threads or whatever else you're doing. And part of it is, experienced raid leading, right? You have a new raid leader versus an experienced raid leader. And I've been in many situations where I'm training a new raid leader and I'm mentoring them. And, if Joe's going to complain here and say, well, that was a bad call. Well, you know what? If it was me making that same call, he might not think it's a bad call. People are easily wanting to harp on a new raid lead because they're new and they're not as experienced, right? Whereas
I want to sort of step in here. With a new raid lead, you kind of have to build the trust of your team.
Exactly.
It's just like a new player. When a new player comes to the team, everybody on the team is watching him. And if you're a new raid lead, you're in a position of authority. And so I've got to learn to trust that when you say it's wrong, that you're right. And I know from watching you raid lead over the years, there are things you see in raid that I wouldn't see in a million years. And it's just because you've been there. So how does the new raid lead handle that with a more experienced raid lead, or how do you mentor someone when you're mentoring a new raid lead?
I'm thinking back to actually The Office, where they replaced Michael Scott. Sorry, spoiler alert. With all the different various bosses, and I don't know, the one guy came from like a steel mill or something, and it's a new raid lead and a new role, and they may not be new to the company or new to the guild, but at the same time, people need to earn their respect. And as a raid lead, well, you need to make the right calls, right? So my suggestion to a new raid lead would be make the easy calls, because those easy calls will help build the trust. So, the combat reses, the wipe, the swaps, some of the easy ones, as people see you're making the right calls, they're going to start putting that trust into you. So when you start making the difficult calls, well, that trust is going to be continued onto those as well.
Well, and as players, you have to be a little bit more lenient with a new raid lead, just like you would a new player. And where do you balance those expectations? And how do you, because it's real easy with a new raid lead, especially if they've come in and they're being mentored, to try to mimic what you're doing. So how do you explain that to them going in?
Well, everybody has their sort of raid lead style, and I'm mentoring new raid leads now, and it's fine. You don't have to copy Sparty's style. Sparty's style is not correct for every guild out there, most people out there, and that's okay. Everyone needs to find their own groove, their own raid style within the framework of the guild, right? I have this sort of setup, this framework that I want players to do. Hold people accountable, and yes, joke around sometimes and keep things efficient, and have you find your own voice, right? That's the biggest one. But it's it is a bit of a balancing act, right? You're gonna have resistance from some players, and that's okay. And it's funny because I see some of these raid leads now that I'm mentoring, and we're on a boss, and I'm trying to take a bit of a step back and see how they do, and I'm doing my own thing, healing away. And I see the raid leads topping the charts, right? Like they're on top of DPS meters, top of healing meters, whatever. And there's 3 people dead, and things are going on, and there's complete silence, right? And just I'm chuckling in my head here, like, okay, this is gonna be a learning moment, right? Where raid lead is gonna affect you, and it's tough to shift from a role where you're responsible for one specific thing and you're doing it really well to sort of really babysitting the entire raid, right? It's going to take a toll on your numbers, and you ask the average raid lead, well, how much does it really affect your numbers, right? Like your numbers being your DPS, your healing, whatever, like 20%, right? Like we're humans, right? We can't focus on too many things at once. So when you're babysitting that raid, your numbers are probably going to drop down unless you're at the highest echelon of raid leads. The Roger Browns out there, like it's tough. It's tough to do. And new raid leads are not going to see all those intricacies that you've talked about, right? Where an experienced raid lead will see. Right, and I don't claim to be the best raid lead ever. There's still plenty for me to learn and plenty for me to build experience on, and maybe I still make plenty of bad calls, right? And I'm often noticing them more, hopefully, than the raid is, right? And I know where to improve on them. But yeah, I mean, it depends, whether some calls are necessarily, right? Like if half the raid is dead and it's gonna be a wipe. Do you necessarily need to call out that player for standing in fire? Maybe not, right? But like you said, maybe the team needs to be a little bit more lenient with newer raid leads, and it's again a learning process for them, right? Think of them as applying to your guild as a raid lead, but they're already in the guild. It's a tough position to be in, and it's a very stressful one too for a lot of players, right? You need to again pick those call outs, build the trust of the team, and then go from there.
Well, and it's a learning experience for both as everybody gets to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
So and it's a communication thing, and it's something that it's not during raid. You're focusing on killing a boss. You shouldn't if you're sitting, you shouldn't be whispering the raid lead about being set out. There's all of these things. So when is the wrong time for players to give feedback or respond, and how do you handle it? Because a lot of people just don't think.
Yeah, and that's fine. People don't understand, what is okay and what is not going on behind the scenes, right? A typical raid lead may be doing a lot of things. They might be doing swaps and adjusting spreadsheets and putting down markers and potentially doing loot and talking to people and giving feedback. There's a lot of things potentially going on in that raid lead, and to throw, more complaints. Oh, Midgets is complaining now because she's being sad, and why didn't Midgets get this piece of loot? And you're complaining to the raid lead. It adds so much more stress and pressure that is really not necessary. So times to not give feedback, well, during raid, right? And well, how do we not give feedback? Well, not big outbursts of like, I can't believe you're sitting me, that raid call was wrong in the middle of an attempt. Like those argumentative, those outbursts, those kinds of things are not okay, and they're gonna put a huge damper on the raid lead. And part of it is it hurts the integrity of the actual team. So if you have a player, let's say they are constantly argumentative with the raid lead, they're saying, oh, that was a mistake, in public, right? That breaks down the confidence fine of the raid lead, but at the same time, the confidence of the team in that person, right? And that's something that's not really going to help the team at all. Like, yeah, people are going to make mistakes, but to be calling out the raid lead on all those things, I'm not saying that we shouldn't keep the raid leads accountable for things, but there's a time and a place, right? If the raid lead then, doesn't step up, well, then the raid leader is being walked over by Joe here or by Midgets, and, Midgets may have a strong personality, or Joe might be right, but now's not the time and the place.
Well, and, there's a difference between, it happens once in a while. You push to talk when you shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens frequently. So what do you do with those players that it's not a one-time deal, and it's getting progressively worse as, and there's a lot of things that'll contribute to that. Longer time in the guild, they get more confident that they're a needed portion and won't be replaced, or end of an X pack or a hard progression boss. That's when you see some of these challenges the most. And a lot of people are right now at the end of an X pack working on a very tough boss, Argus. And I'm guessing that they're seeing a lot of things like this. So what do you do? So for example, if you have somebody who's been isn't part of the main team for the Argus kill, and a lot of guilds are extending to get Argus down. So you've been extending for 3, 4, 5 weeks, however long it takes you to get to that last part. And this player hasn't been in, and of course there's no mythic farm prior to that because you're extending, and is arguing with the raid lead during the raid and threatening to quit and all of these kinds of things. What do you do with a player like that?
I mean, it's a tough one. It depends on the player, and you know, yes, you're not part of the team, right? So, sorry, not part of the core team. And again, we talked earlier, well, what if you're sitting for 3 weeks because you're not part of the core Argus team, for instance, and you're going to be extending for a number of weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, while you try to get this boss down? That kind of attitude, you know, really, yeah, people get frustrated, right? People make mistakes, and that's okay, right? People can get snarky, people get, you know, upset, people can threaten to quit, whatever, because they're frustrated. They want to be in there, and they obviously care, right? They care about being part of the team, and they want to be in there, and that's fine. But to the players, well, what can you do to contribute outside of the raid? And I'm talking about, you know, go farm herbs or some crap, right? Like, what can you actually do to contribute, whether it's a positive atmosphere and a positive attitude, or help strat discussions, or going through logs? So that's one thing that really helps, where as a raid lead, if I'm doing stuff and the people sitting out can go through logs, between wipes, it saves us so much time, because then I don't have to do that. I can focus on making the adjustments in the raid, and, you know, let's say Midgets, who's been sitting out, can say, oh yeah, well, this happened in the logs, and we need to adjust this based off this timer, right? Those are kinds of things that that really do help. And so, I mean, what are some other ones? I know we've got a couple notes for, you know, over the 14 years, we've had all kinds of different players, you know, in the guild.
Well, and not only in this guild, in guilds that I've been in, because I've been in different guilds.
Mm-hmm.
What about the guy that he is subject of a wrong call out? The raid leader was actually wrong. He did nothing wrong. He was doing what he was supposed to do. But during the raid, he comes back and says, "You're a flippin' idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm doing what you said to do."
Oof. Yeah. Yeah.
And then when he's, let's say, gets sat, he says, "Well, I just want to leave for the rest of the night."
Okay. Well, that's fine. I mean, well, really, it's fine with a period. So like the woman fine, you know, when a girl tells you that's fine with a period, you know it's never fine. So yes, that's fine. With these calls, that's something what I mentioned earlier, where if these players are being argumentative to you early on, you need to shut that shit down, as you know, as Negan would say, and you need to stop it, because that kind of stuff is going to hurt the integrity of your leadership, right? You can't have those things happen, because the rest of your team sees that, oh, you know, this person's being walked all over, they're not stepping up, and yeah, you know what? Raid leads make the wrong call. You know, I've called out people incorrectly plenty of times, and it happens. And that's okay. So what is the right time? Well, after the raid, say, hey, you called me out for this. Well, here's a log saying I did something differently, or I was doing it for this reason. Let's chat about it. And you know what? I'm 100% okay being wrong. And some of my guildies know that I'm okay saying, hey, you know what? You were right. That was a bad call. My apologies, right? You know, I'll try to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's fine. And that's what we do. We try to, again, perpetually improve. And, you know, the call outs, the yelling in mid raid, being argumentative raid, that is not the time and the place for a player to do that.
Well, in the next one, you know, you always have those 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of those really, really good players, and they're awesome, and they call everybody else out. And then when they get called out, or they screw around in raid, or they wipe the raid intentionally thinking it's funny.
Whoa, what?
And then,
what?
Yeah, hey, I've seen it. I've seen people, you know, pull people off of pull them off of a platform to kill somebody because it's their friend, or things like that. And they're screwing around in raid. And then when they get called out for doing something wrong, it's a whole big explosion.
Well, I
You're still working on the wipes the raid intentionally, huh?
I'm trying to think of a good reason to wipe the raid intentionally. Like, okay, maybe if a wipe has been called and, you know, you have a soul bomb on Argus and you can wipe the raid and die, okay, fine. But you mean like to wipe the raid because it's funny? Is that the question you had?
Well, yeah, I've seen it happen many times.
How is that?
I mean, think about, okay, we'll use Aloria because it's a good example. And she only did it in fun places. But let's use Aloria because that one was, she didn't do it during progression rating, but she would life grip you in front of snails. I can think of all kinds of places she life gripped you.
Okay, so for context here, for our viewers, Aloria was a priest player in Death Jesters for a number of years. She was an officer at some point as well, and she had a very good life grip, is what we're gonna say. So yes,
she was very good with it.
She was very good. And yeah, so Aloria, for instance, you know, we're doing trash in Throne of Thunder, and there's these stupid snails where obviously if you get stuck in front of them, you die. And of course, you know, they would try to kill me, and that's part of the fun. That's fine. But I'm thinking more like, hey, it's middle of an attempt. You know, it's, I don't know, the boss is at 20%. Let's go wipe the raid for fun. How does that have any place in a guild or raid? That's so disrespectful to the entire team, right? Like, you're going to intentionally wipe because you find it funny? That's not funny. Like, I've spent 300 pulls on this damn boss and you want to wipe us because it's funny? I mean, for me, that'd be, you have no place in this raid. You're done, right? Like, there's none of it. That is not okay. And to the other part where, yeah, they're calling people out for mistakes and, you know, then their ego is too big for their own make mistakes. Again, realize you're an imperfect person and you're going to make mistakes and other people are going to correct you too, and that's okay, right? Whether you're the raid leader or you're not, or you're a player and, you know, you're hot shit in the raid, and, you know, maybe you should just focus on going into your hot air balloon because that's where your hot head is, right? It's yeah, anyway.
Well, you finally figured out a way to get in the hot air balloons, huh? God. Well, we got one more personality type, and they're the one that's just not good enough. They're generally not, either they're, you know, the last one in, or maybe they're a backup or on the bench.
Mm-hmm.
And they're constantly complaining and criticizing the leadership for lack of strats, or for not extending, for extending, or for the decision they're making. Or they take hours upon hours in needing reassurance, or they come to you and ask you how to do a specific thing that, you know, well, how do I drew it? And instead of coming up with questions that are more difficult, they sort of want you to hand walk it through. And so what do you do with that kind of personality?
So you've got a player that complains about everything. So whether you extend or you don't extend, or the strats or the lack of strats. So part of that, I mean, can be, okay, well, there's a lack of strats. You know, there's, hey, this raid isn't going fast enough and they're complaining. Okay. Would you like to help step up and put in some effort, or would you like to continue putting the effort into complaining? Again, the complaining, the criticism, it takes a toll on anybody, right? Like, you're breaking your raid lead down by putting more and more stress because people are unhappy, right? And we're talking about this a little bit later, but there's a fine line sort of meter where, you know, how much are you contributing to the team, right? You know, all these things they can do themselves. Okay, so for every single player on the raid team, you've got this value meter, and I'm going to put this in a very pragmatic setting where you're contributing X amount, and you're, you know, what is the opposite of contributing? You're what is the word, midgets? Not contributing. You're I don't know, you're a detriment to the raid this much, right? And, you know, depending on where you lay on the scale, that's how valuable you are to the guild and to the raid team. Whereas if your benefit to the raid hits this threshold where you're more of a detriment than you are contributing to the entire raid, then this is where the raid leader or the guild leader lets you go, right? You know, if you're contributing more, like, yeah, listen, you know what, you're an awesome player, and yeah, you can complain a little bit too, and, you know, you've got a little bit of an ego sometimes, rarely it comes out, and, you know, that kind of stuff happens. But if you're, you know, 99% of the time super awesome, and yes, you're a great player and you're a great person, then that's fine. You're on the better end of this threshold, right? But with a lot of these players that you suggested, you know, is the headache worth it, right? You're a raid lead. I'm putting together my leisure time, and I know there's gonna be some some given stress for some of these raid lead positions and guild lead positions. I could be doing other things. I could be spending family time. I could be playing sports, playing other games, whatever. And you're sacrificing this time to lead because no one else will, or because there's no one else to do it. Is the headache worth it? Probably not, right? And again, if they're past that threshold of what they're hindering the raid or detracting from the raid or whatever, then maybe they need to be let go, because those kinds of players, and again, this is 17 years of World of Warcraft and EverQuest, guild and raid leading speaking, those players are not contributing, right? Everyone on your team is really on this meter. And, believe it or not, that's sort of what happens, right?
Well, and it is right. And there's all kinds of personality types. So as a raid leader, how do you want your players to have that conversation, and what do you do for yourself?
Well, again,
Because it can be really, I know, just in listening to people, there are days, there are weeks where all I've got are people in my DMs telling me about how they hate something. And there are some days when I'm like, you know what, I need to go do something else because I don't have any more to give to anybody. Because everybody forgets that 20, 30, in this case, anywhere from 50 to 100 people come and share whatever they're upset about today, whether it's a raid lead yelled at them or whatever. So what do you do as a leader to encourage the people to come with you with a little bit better etiquette? I like the word etiquette. And what do you do for yourself?
Well, again, it's that state of perpetual improvement. When you talk to the various raiders or whoever else has criticism for you, you want people to give you that criticism. You have to be able to accept it. And I was thinking of a quote from earlier today where, your friends will talk shit to your face, right? If you're doing something stupid, they're going to call you on it. And then behind your back, they're going to tell you about how awesome you are to other players. And you want those kind of people around in your guild, right? The people that are going to call you on your stuff. And, I've had Roshi, which has been an awesome officer, and I've had you, you've called me on my crap sometimes, and that's totally fine, right? That's why I have you guys in those positions, because I respect that, and it sort of balances out Sparty and balances out the guild leadership and the officer leadership, and you have to be willing to take that criticism, right? They're giving it to you because they care, not because they're upset of they're butthurt for whatever reason. They care about the same thing as you do, and sometimes you're gonna make mistakes. So earlier I said, yeah, if you as a raid lead make a wrong call on somebody, okay, well, this person is now pointing out that call was wrong, and they're like, hey, this log shows this. You called me out on this, and it was not right, and I don't appreciate it. Well, yeah, it's okay. So this is where you apologize. You're right. I totally missed it. Raid leads are often trying to correct on a whim based off what we see and our experience and that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's worth, a public guild apology, where I remember during Ursoc, we had a warrior, and, he was executing like crazy, and he was like a 0.1% like kill. Like, we were so close to dying, and rather than running out for the charge, he stayed into DPS. And I yelled at him I'm like, that was so crazy, that was irresponsible, we shouldn't have done that. But realistically, that was the reason why we had killed the boss. And I felt terrible afterwards. I had to tell the entire guild, that was the wrong call. This guy, he saved the day, and Sparty made the wrong call. And that was after a decade plus of running the guild. Yeah, you can still make those big mistakes, and that's okay. But again, you should be humble enough to make that apology if you do make mistakes, right? You're going to make mistakes. Call yourself out for them, and that's totally fine. People will respect that more than, oh, well, I'm never wrong. I'm basically perfect here.
The raid leader is always right.
Except
you
when
want
he's
to
wrong.
utilize those, yeah, right. You want to utilize good ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because sometimes some of the best ideas come from other players or other teams. And I know one of the things I watched you do over the years, when you guys were working on Strat, you talk with your stream, you talk to Relo a lot. You talk to people in your Paladin friends, and there was always a networking of doing that. And so other players are going to bring that in. And sometimes some of the new ideas are great ideas. Sometimes you've already tried them and they're bad. So you have to learn to utilize the good ideas and then just get rid of the rest. But the most important thing, and I think all of us leaders need to remember this, is what, Sparty?
Well, why has Death Jesters been successful, or Zeros to Heroes been successful? Why? Because it all comes down to the support team. All comes down to the veterans and the members and the core players that have made it such an awesome home for so long, right? It's not because of one person. It's because of the guild as a whole. And when people say on stream, "Oh, Zeros to Heroes is fantastic," I love the community, blah blah blah. Okay, I've heard it a million times, but you know why? It's because of people like that are joining the community, and people like the officers and the veterans here that are supporting the team. That is why the guild's been successful, right? It's people that are helping out with strats and spreadsheets and a positive atmosphere and a positive attitude and all those things. That good support team is absolutely crucial, right? And there's times where you're put too much pressure on yourself, and you have certain goals in mind for your guild and your raid team, and it can create some really negative thoughts in your head. Sometimes, you need to be able to take days off. And, I know Midgets now takes Sundays off. And Sundays is her day off from guild stuff, whatever. It can wait, right? The world will not end if Midgets is taking a vacation for a day. So she takes a day off, and then I bring her back for the podcast, so she takes really half a day off. And that's a good system that, works for her, right? She's doing her own thing, and I'm trying not to bug her too much. And, whether it's Discord invites or guild invites or whatever, well, I'm taking Sundays, and the rest of the team is helping out as well. So that's really the big stuff.
Well, and honestly, there's little things. So, and we talked about it earlier in the podcast. The film that Short Film made for Zeros to Heroes anniversary, it really revitalized me. And sometimes it's those little things, whether it's a cute little note or whatever, where somebody says, "Hey, we appreciate this," instead of all of the 15,000 things they hate because Joe didn't like green on that day. And I told Short Film, I said, that video really revitalized me. Thank you. And those things are important too. So as players and team members, it's good to come to your leaders not only with bad things, but sometimes it's just nice to say, "Hey, I think you do an awesome job. What can I do to help you?"
Yeah, you're absolutely right. For the 50 things that you get complaints about, that one thing, right? That one positive note back to the raid leader or whatever person in leadership, that makes a huge difference. And for instance, as a content creator, when Blizzard invites me to the BlizzCon, Blizzard mixers and things like that, and they've had all these pictures of all the content creators and things like that. Like, that makes me feel great. That really revitalized me for a lot of content creation and podcasting stuff, and it makes you feel really appreciated, right? And again, how good it feels. Make sure you do the same thing to your raid as well. Give them that positive feedback when necessary.
Well, and before we jump into the closing, we had a couple of viewer questions. I'm not going to say his name. Anubis God TV. He asks, is it okay for a majority of your raid to change classes going into a new axe pack? It's a bit off topic, but I thought it was a good question.
Sure, why not? What's wrong with that?
Well, pros and cons to the raid team. Go.
So with respect to Death Jesters, for instance, if you want to switch classes, whatever, you're going from, let's say, a Ret Paladin to a Warrior, that's fine. As long as we don't have two other Warriors on the team, that's totally fine. It's a melee to melee. It's going from Conk to Prot. Not that loot's really going to be much of an issue next year. And yeah, you want a bit of a balance, but if people are really hating on Ret and they really love, Warrior play for some silly reason with the GCD changes, then absolutely go for it. It's more of an issue if somebody is, let's say, a ranged DPS. Let's say they're a Warlock, which are a premium right now, and they want to go tank. Well, we're going to lose a Warlock. We already have, 2-3 tanks. It probably not going to be the best fit. But roll ones. If tank wants to go from, let's say, Towley wants to go from Paladin to Bear, or from Bear to Monk, whatever. That's fine. We're most of you listening are not in that, top 30, top 50 setting where the class really matters. So play what you want. You'll be fine. Whether you want to play a Demon Hunter or a Warrior or whatever, you're going to be fine. It doesn't matter.
Now, this one was semi-poking at you, I think, but because he came back later and answered the question himself. But Relo asked, if a raid leader makes the wrong call during a fight, and I know for certain it is going to result in a wipe, should I still follow it?
Ah, interesting. So this is a really good one because I know it's coming from Rolo, and I know there's been a couple of situations where, while he raided with us, Sparty makes a wrong call there, but he knows it's wrong because he's got the raid leader experience as well, and he's a solid player, most of the time, and he knows that call is going to lead out to a wipe. So he does the other thing, and that's sort of you're rolling the dice there, where okay, well, in general, if someone is going to, to make the wrong call, it should be the raid lead, right? I'd rather be wiping it because the raid lead made a mistake than somebody didn't follow directions, right? That's a majority of the time. And the exceptions and the outliers are the, the really exceptional players that know their stuff and they know the raid leader has missed something. And yeah, sometimes it's going to be okay to go against the raid leader and do your thing, right? But those situations should generally be few and far between.
And as someone showed you, they actually killed the boss.
That's right. I mean, exactly. Prove me wrong. Absolutely. I'm okay being wrong, right? We should all be okay being wrong.
So how would you summarize today's podcast?
So is the raid leader always right? Do they always know best? Well, not necessarily, right? We try to do our best, and, it's a role that we sometimes want and sometimes don't want. But I mean, it's it's the good and the bad and the ugly, and what do you do with someone who just doesn't fit on your team? And sometimes those players are not worth the headache, right? You've got enough headaches and you've got enough pressure on you from the raid team. It's not worth keeping those players around if they're not contributing. If they pass that threshold of you're too much of a detriment for the team now, right? Then you were contributing to the team. Sorry, it's time to let go. As a raid lead, it's really important to be fair, which means, keeping people accountable. And sometimes you make mistakes, and that's okay, right? Again, perpetual improvement, right? You want to keep people accountable, and, when they do a great job, again, you pat them on the back, and that was a smooth kill, great DPS, awesome healing, great communication. There's all kinds of different fights, in Antorus that are great staples of that. And at the end of the day, the pressure, the stress, the success and the failure is on you as officers and as raid leads. Nobody else shares that burden, right? The raiders do what they're told and they do their thing, and that's fine. But the decisions you make should be for the betterment of the team every single time. And lots of guilds, let good players go because that's what's better for the overall health of the team, right? Whether they're DDoSing their own healers or they've got a really crappy attitude or whatever, right? They let those players go. Don't be afraid of doing that, right? You don't want to have your guild die, your raid team die from inaction, right? More guilds have fallen apart from inaction and from the drama than by cutting out the cancers of your guild. And while the raid leaders aren't always right, we need to put our faith and trust in them, for the success of the guild. Whether it's a new raid lead or an experienced one, you're coming in that role, give them a little bit of faith and give them benefit of the doubt to do their thing. And at the same time, as raid leads, we are accountable to those players, right? At the end of the day, always do what's best for the guild, right? And it's you got these players sometimes where you've got them around for a long time, but it's hard to let people like that go that have been a staple part of your guild. At the end of the day, though, whether someone's been here for a year or 5 years or 10 years, or they're a huge contributor to your team, right? It's ultimately what is best for your guild. That is what's most important at the end of the day. So that was a good one. Is the raid leader always right? Most of the time they do their best, like everybody else does, right? So with that, we have a couple of closing thoughts for you guys. Number one, happy birthday, Zeros to Heroes. Happy 3rd birthday, which is exciting. We're, we've got an awesome video we're going to tweet out tomorrow for you guys that short film and Ariana made. It's really, really good. It's really touching. It's like, this should be like a 10-year anniversary video, but it's really good. We do have beta keys coming out. Blizzard was awesome enough to give us 30 beta keys. So over the next week, we've sort of planned out how we want to give out beta keys to our viewers and podcast listeners and things like that. So for our podcast giveaway, I'm going to give away 5 beta keys. You need to email us, bestinslotpodcast@gmail.com, with the one thing you are looking forward to the most, as well as what you would like to hear on the podcast. So you have to give us 2 answers, email them to us, and we're going to draw people next week. So on next week's podcast, 5 people we're going to draw, probably read out some of these answers. I want to see what other people are really looking forward to.
Are we going to draw them, or are we going to pick the ones we like the best?
I don't know. Maybe we'll draw 3 and pick 2 of our favorites or something. We'll figure it out.
Oh, yeah, because I can't see you just wanting to random this. Because Joe comes in and says unicorns and loot is their answer, and they win the drawing. I can't see you going for that.
They're one-word answers. Sorry, I don't accept one-word answers. If you have pictures, good paragraphs. I love reading stuff, right? I love long applications too. But yeah, so that's going to be really fun. So email us, bestinslotpodcast@gmail.com with the one thing you are looking forward towards in BFA, as well as what you would like to have us cover on as a podcast. It could be general, it could be your own stories and whatever. So we'll build topics around that. Outside of that, we have more contests coming this weekend. Tomorrow, we're going to start off rolling them off with musical chairs. For those of you that saw our musical chairs event a while ago, it'll be really, really fun. Dazzling rods, foam swords. That'll be Monday for a couple giveaways, as well as celebrating the Zeros to Heroes anniversary. Again, lots of Guild Survivor themed things. On Tuesday, we'll do a Twitter contest. On Wednesday, we'll do the jump contest. Well, I'm not going to spoil some of these because you guys are going to practice. So we're going to do some awesome, fun things in game that you guys should not be practicing for. And yeah, we've got 30 keys to give away. I'm excited to give them away to you guys starting tomorrow. Thanks again to Blizzard.
Just remember, anything you practice, we may change. Well, you may have to be drunk, or you don't get to have any gear, or you have a timer, because we're evil like that.
We are evil, and maybe we should do one giveaway for like best dad joke. We should have everybody submit dad jokes over the course of the week, and I choose the best one for a key.
No.
I like that. And it has to be Warcraft related.
That's a horrid idea. That is a horrid idea.
It's a great idea. We're going to do it on Twitter or something. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much. It was a great episode. Have a good night. Be excellent to each other. Again, follow us on Twitter and email us bestinslotpodcast@gmail.com. Have a good night. Be excellent to each other. And as always, live your life heroically. Have a fantastic evening. Good night.